Well, I got to tell you, folks, I'm truly humbled to have an opportunity to address such a prestigious group of people. People that have one goal, and that's this country and the people that put us in office to protect them. Again, I really feel humble in this group. Sheriff Palmer, I'm not going to have everybody stand up like you did. It's just too easy for them to just walk out the door, so I'm not going to do that. Let's see. Let me digress for just a minute. I know I've got a short period of time here, but I was one of those blue berets that worked over in some of those foreign countries. And Sheriff Tom back there, we served together in Kosovo. What was unique about that was it was a country that was war-torn. There was no law enforcement. There was no government. There was absolutely no infrastructure, no attorneys. That's not all bad. No ticket books. Yeah, there were no courts, no judges. I mean, it was nothing. And we had to rebuild that, and we built it to the American standards. And I think by the time we left, we'd made a pretty good dent in the operations that we were involved in. But you know what was unique about that is I felt that I had a unique opportunity to relive vicariously through this other country what our revolution must have been like. They were actually taking people out and executing them. I saw that. I personally saw it happen. There were a lot of bad things going on. And I thought to myself at the time, any country, I don't care how strong it is, I don't care how proud they are, I don't care how resilient they are, you pull the economy out from a country and you're going to have that. You're going to have total chaos. I'm seriously concerned about it. I've had a lot of people in my jurisdiction come up to me and ask, what are we going to do? You know, you heard some of the other counties going through their dissertations earlier today regarding no timber, no funding to sustain them. July 1st, I'm looking at laying off 50 to 70% of my people. That's going to devastate us. We are sitting on one of the wealthiest mineral deposits in the western states. In my county, we can't touch it. Timber has been stopped. That's always been our mainstay. So we've got no timber, and now we've got no federal subsidy for not cutting that timber. So we're in the same pickle. In fact, in southwest Oregon, there's about 6 counties that we're looking at closing our doors around October. There will be no money. So this is really a critical issue to me. Now, what started for me well, let me say this first. I don't consider myself an authority. I don't consider myself any kind of an expert on any of these issues. I got involved in researching about 3 years ago. I had a couple of miners come in and they started complaining about how they felt that they were being mistreated, abused, and so forth. So I promised them I'd look into it. Well, the more I looked into it, the more I realized there were a lot of things that were just wrong. So I went to the U.S. Forest Service and I asked them, you know, what are you doing with these people by name? Well, we can't tell you, was their answer. I says, well, excuse me, as the chief law enforcement official, this is my jurisdiction. I would like to know what you're doing with these people. Their comment to me was, file a Freedom of Information request. After I scraped myself off the ceiling, and I get passionate once in a while, I went back and I wrote a short brief that went into the local paper. About 2 days later, I got a call, we'd like to talk to you, come in and sit down. Well, that was just to shut me up. The questions I started to ask was, where did you get your jurisdiction to do what you're doing? Where in the Constitution does it address this stuff? And I got a different answer from everybody I've asked. I had one of the head rangers out of Tacoma, Washington, come down and visit with me. And she then provided me with yet another document. And just most recently, in January 12th, we met with the U.S. attorney in Portland. And I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but there might be a big chunk missing. It sure felt like it that day. Glenn Palmer, Sheriff Glenn Palmer was with me, and the questions we were posing was, again, where does the constitutional authority come from to do what you're doing? You know what? They didn't answer us. They broke out into a little dissertation between each other. I mean, I don't think anybody knew what to ask or what to say, but we never got our answers, and then they just proceeded to tear into me. How many of you read that the first 10-page document and then the 12 pages that followed, or a 13-page document that I wrote? I wrote a white paper, and it wasn't just me that put this together. It was a lot of people. In fact, two of the researchers that helped me with this are here, Loma Wharton and Gene Pringle from the Roseburg area. They helped me greatly. I'm not an attorney. We did a lot of research, looked up a lot of different laws, came up with the conclusion I did, and basically is I think they're violating the 10th Amendment. I really have a strong suspicion that that's what they're doing. Now let me ask you folks, how many of you are pretty upset with the federal government? And you know what? I think that's pretty much predominant throughout the entire country today. Now is the perfect storm. If there were ever a better time for us to stand our ground and draw the line in the sand and say, this is how we're going to do it, now is the time. I don't think we'd have a better opportunity than the window we're looking at right now. What I try to do is I try to look for the root of the problem or the heart of the problem and attack that. The federal government is heavily engaged in PSYOP operations. And what I mean by that is they come from different directions, different levels, and the idea is to overwhelm you. How many sheriffs, maybe just getting started with research and looking into this stuff, feel pretty overwhelmed? Guess what, folks? I'm there with you. I'm learning. Now, if I say anything wrong, I highly encourage any one of you to correct me, whether it be here. I don't care about being embarrassed. I want the truth of what I'm professing, because I don't want to be called a wingnut. What I tried to do is I'm going to bring this to what I thought was the simplest term possible. I'm going to take you back to 1777. Our first Constitution was the Articles of Confederation. In the first 4 years, they argued venomously over what are we going to do with the Western lands. Well, then the resolution of 1780 said it. The federal trust obligating the United States to extinguish their governmental jurisdiction and title to the land to any territory that took statehood. Clearly written. And the reason that I think this is such an important feature is that under Article 6, Clause 1, all debts contracted and engagements entered into, which this is an engagement. We have now a federal trust of our lands. Under Article 6, Clause 2, the Constitution and the laws of the United States, which we made in pursuance thereof of the treaties made, shall become the supreme law of the land. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Article 6, Clause 3, everybody in an office has to take the oath. And what do they have to protect and defend? The Constitution. Now, the term engagement, nor Article 6, has been amended. My understanding, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong in this, the only way you can change the Constitution is by amendment and amendment only. Does anyone disagree with that? That's my understanding. Sir, we'll talk about Hillary Clinton later if you want. I've got stories to share with you. I believe it was like someplace around 1901. I think one of the presidents pulled some land off to the side and he says, I'm going to make a forest out of this. And then in 1976, the federal government finally put it in black and white that they're not going to dispose of the lands any longer, they're going to keep them. Now you can draw all kinds of conclusions and suppositions as to why they're doing it. Personally, what I think is they're closing down all the resources so they can save the resources use that as collateral to borrow money from other countries. I could be way off base, but that's what I believe. I already addressed this under Article 5 on amendments. The only way you can change the Constitution is through an amendment. Next slide. The Bill of Rights to avoid usurpation or reconstruction of the Constitution. The 10th Amendment, you clearly understand if the powers weren't granted to the federal government, the central government, and they weren't prohibited to the states, they belong to the states and the people. Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in the Congress of these states and shall consist of the Senate and House of Representatives. Where in the Constitution does it grant the authority to legislate police powers to the central government beyond its delegated powers? There are certain things that the federal government can do law enforcement with. It's clearly stated. Taxes, duties, imposts, excises, pay debts, provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, borrow money, regulate commerce, coin money, regulate the value of the money, punishment for counterfeiting, establish post office, post roads, and it goes on and on. Plus talks about piracy. Three things kept coming up when I asked, where's your authority come from? One of them was Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, the property clause. As you can see here, the property clause shall have the power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or property belonging to the United States. What that refers to, and you probably know this better than I do, is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17. It specifically enumerates where that's at and what it is. It is 10 miles square. It is Washington, D.C. It is for lands within your state that they have exclusive jurisdiction over, and it's for forts, dockyards, those kind of things, clearly spelled out in the Constitution. In Oregon, we got some unique doors I'm looking at to see if it'll do us any good or not. When Oregon applied for Congress, it was voted in 1859 for statehood. After that, they came back with 6 propositions, and it required a vote of the people. Our researchers have looked. There has never been a record of a vote in the state of Oregon. Now, it doesn't mean that we're not a state, but these 6 propositions may not even count. We're looking into that. So Oregon's unique in that sense. Territorial rules were not expected to outlast or survive statehood. So if you hear them talking about we've got these territorial laws, if you're a state, those laws don't apply anymore. 12 western states were denied the equal footing doctrine. What that meant is when you entered statehood, you got all the same rights and sovereignty and everything else that the original states did. However, in checking further, in the Articles of Confederation, they actually turned it down. But the Congress went ahead and included it. So we're still supposed to have equal rights. We're all supposed to have equal rights when you enter statehood. Well, there's some discrepancy whether that occurred or not. So that may be another window that we need to address. National forest within a county. Under Oregon statute, again, Oregon, if a national forest resides within a county, it has to be voted on by the people. That vote never occurred either. So those are some additional things that we're looking into. Now, in that meeting I just had in Portland, I got hammered pretty good because I didn't believe what they were telling me, and I so repeated. The statement was the Supreme Court is the supreme law of the land. I take issue, do you? Yes. Absolutely. The Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. The second statement was the Supreme Court defines the Constitution. I think we're kind of splitting hairs here. It could be meant one of two ways. I took it offensively, of course. The Supreme Court does not define the Constitution, but rather decides whether legislation is either repugnant to or in harmony with. That's their job. So I'm done. Again, folks, thank you very much.